Okay, we're here. Welcome to Bridging the Gap finally. We're in a Bridging the Gap themed room because of the color.
Correct.
He's wearing a Bridging the Gap themed t-shirt and socks, which can't be seen. But welcome Om Dhumatkar to the Bridging the Gap podcast.
Thank you so much, Anvay Dikshit, big fan. And also Pratish, big fan.
We're the biggest fans, sir.
So I think we've set the theme for this episode now. Like
Yes.
it's mutual love.
Yeah.
I think
Brotherly love, brotherly appreciation. Yeah.
brotherly guidance, I would say.
Guidance.
Yes.
Well, yeah, it is guidance. It is guidance for sure. And we have a lot of stuff planned that you know a little about, little that you don't know about, but the public doesn't know anything. So let me firstly introduce them to you if they don't know who you are. And he's been kind enough to send us a formal intro. I'm not actually going to read from that because then it feels like we're in a school program. But
Yeah.
I want to still introduce him. So Om Dada is one of the UK's largest commercial banks
MD.
managing director. He's the
Yeah.
MD of the bank. He's a corporate world guy, not really turned into a person who's now into spirituality,
Right.
because he's had that in his life from a very long time.
Yeah.
He'll tell us more about it. But he's a Bombay boy, lives in London, now is in Bombay very often.
I think his
Plays-
heart is in India.
Heart
and soul is in India.
भाई दिल है हिंदुस्तानी from day one. वो तो उधर जाके अंग्रेजों को दिखाना है ना, हम कम नहीं हैं.
So
I don't know.
it's like ओम दादा वहाँ पे जाके अंग्रेजों को लूट रहे हैं.
No
Oh my
comments.
God.
I
Oh
should
my
say,
God.
I am an MD at the bank, not
Yes.
the MD of the
Right,
bank. I
right.
think this is
Okay.
worth clarifying because a lot of people think they're like, wow, you're the MD of the bank. I was like, okay, no, I am the MD for my part of the bank,
Right.
Yeah.
but it's a big bank.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Same thing happened a few years ago. I joined a bank and I became their VP, vice president.
Right.
And like I got a call from someone saying, "You're vice president of so and so." I was like, "I'm a vice president, not the vice president."
we know the bank that you're talking about, but you're not going to name it again. Yeah. And before that, you were a manager at another. I wouldn't say a bank, but a consulting firm, right?
भाई अभी LinkedIn पे आ जाओ.
Well, we did go through your
We went through everything. So
And since we're on this, I wanted to start because I mean that's how LinkedIn works. You look at people's, okay, this is where they've studied, this is where they've done X, Y, Z, but not for that purpose.
Yeah.
Since this is for the audience to get to know you a little better, for us to talk about many relatable topics, not just for us but for the people as well. I wanted to start back to your school life,
Okay.
and I mean basically he's a Bombay boy. You've grown up in Bombay.
Correct.
So how was it growing up in Bombay? What was it like when you were at our age and
It
younger?
was epic. So when I was your age, I was already in London.
Okay.
So I only lived I lived my first 18 years in Mumbai. I grew up here. I was born here.
you did your schooling.
And then
here.
I did my schooling here. And then after 11th and 12th, I went to the UK. So I went there as a teenager. I'd never been to London, never been to UK.
Yeah.
I had been abroad once on a school trip, and that was it. And you just showed up with like whatever 4 suitcases and said, "This is now my life, and you have to do what you have to do." But life in Bombay was really nice. I mean, I say Bombay because up until 1996 it was Bombay,
was
and then it
Bombay.
became Mumbai.
Right.
Yeah.
So more of my time in Mumbai was spent calling it Bombay,
Bombay.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it was nice, man. It was very different, I think, in many ways, and very similar in many ways. I think it was different, and this is just my experience of it, in the sense that it was a little bit more personable.
Right, right.
I felt like you could engage with the city a lot more than you can today. So, for example, when I was younger, I used to walk everywhere, cycle, take the buses and stuff like that. And it was just a lot of fun. Like, it wasn't stressful to do that.
Were the roads better?
The roads were always dug up. I think that's a perpetual thing. That's a perpetual sign about being in Mumbai.
Yeah.
But I just don't think that there were those many cars on the roads.
Yeah,
and so
I was
on.
just
So
going
it's
to
a-
mention that. It would have been empty. Right?
Exactly.
Not
So it's a
empty, but like less cars, I would say. Yeah.
It's a slightly superficial comparison, but I
Right,
think
right.
the ability to enjoy the city was greater then, you know,
Okay.
and that was quite nice.
Yeah.
Because I find that now even I still haven't given up old habits. I still like to walk from point A to point B.
Right.
But as an asthmatic, it gets a little bit noisy. It gets a bit coffee at the end of it whenever I go. So I've got my inhaler in my pocket. I've got a trusted bottle of water even for this session.
Well, especially because of the pollution and the construction, not just that the roads are dug up, they're making new roads now.
Yeah.
And there's so much pollution because of that, because I stay in a part where that's happening. I know you are close by as well. So it's crazy.
Right.
That dust.
But I feel like India is very different from other countries. I mean, having lived abroad for half my life, and I feel like we're at a bit of a transition period. Like, I'm hugely optimistic about India. In fact, not just optimistic, I'm properly bullish on India and India's growth.
Okay.
And I feel like maybe there's going to be a few years while that transition happens, but there's going to be so much growth happening so soon that people are going to demand better. And I feel like one of the things that's been really remarkable for me, particularly over the last, say, 5 or 6 years that I've seen, is that connectivity across the country has gotten a lot better.
Better.
Which means that it's actually easier to...
How the hell did that start on my phone? What the hell?
We should definitely not cut this.
That was very nice.
Listen,
Okay,
just so the audience knows that Anvay's phone basically started talking about weight loss. So I don't know if this is a hidden sign, bro. You call me on your podcast and then tell me about weight loss. Chalna, I know you're good at yoga, but still, I'm trying, okay?
No, this is by mistake. I have no idea how that opened up. I have no clue. But yeah, you were saying.
So yeah, it's just, I feel like connectivity is getting better and remote working is becoming easier.
Yeah.
And I feel like the combination of those two means that some of the more like physical challenges of being located in one place, in one city, and taking an hour or a couple of hours to get from point A to point B are going to disappear.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I always wonder, I mean, on one hand, it is true that we're getting better, like things are going in the right direction.
Right.
Nitin Gadkari should be thanked for the transportation part at least.
Right.
But like, why do you think that the pollution is so high? Because everyone has wondered, and I've seen cricket fans also say this, when cricket like matches happen on TV and there's a lot of pollution when it's happening here, you can see it, but abroad it's somehow like not the case. What do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, if you went abroad in the 19th century and saw Manchester and Birmingham and these cities for what they were, it was an absolute hellhole, for lack of a better phrase. Like, it was extremely difficult to live in those countries and to live in those cities at that point in time. Like,
the Industrial Revolution time
was happening, and even after the Industrial Revolution, and let's be honest, like, those countries got wealthy, and I'm not just talking about the UK, but other European countries as well, became wealthy because they inbuilt structural advantages over their colonies, right? Like,
and India is just doing that right now.
And India is actually progressing without that.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, we aren't dominating any other country.
Right.
We're not like going out there and extracting
Right.
resources
Right.
from elsewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And you see that happening in the world even today.
Right.
You know, so we are, I like, one of the things I love, and this is a slightly spiritual perspective, is that India is becoming an advanced country. India is becoming one of the leading countries in the world, whilst setting an example of what good leadership looks like.
Yes.
Precisely,
Yes. Yeah. 100% agree.
But I want to add one more thing. Don't you think the pollution is a little more related to the fact that the population that we have, we're like the most populated country in the entire world, and because of that, it poses a lot of challenges for us also as a developing country. So that also can be a contributing factor, don't you think?
Definitely, and like, it's things come in an order, right?
Right.
We can sort of reduce the amount of industrial construction activity and probably get cleaner skies. But the cost of that is that people's livelihoods will really suffer. Or we invest a period of time in growing, and then once we grow, we demand better. And that's the reality, right? Like, look at Mumbai airport or Bangalore or Delhi or any of these places. They are fantastic airports. They're some of the most beautiful airports in the world. And believe me, I've traveled a lot, and I am yet to find airports as nice as the ones that we've got in India. Why did that happen? Like, when I left Mumbai, it wasn't a great airport. It happened because as we grew, we demanded better. And I feel like that effect will keep happening in other aspects of our life as well.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, so now, because you've lived abroad for so many years and now you're seeing this trend happen, what was it like for a person who was like at the age of 18, in this still coming up country that was not seen as developed, even maybe now we're not developed yet, but we're really on that, rise. So 18 years ago, 15 years ago, when you were still here.
Yeah.
And the fact that you mentioned also it was your first time that you went to London.
Yeah.
And
So
you haven't gone anywhere. Like being in London for I would say an 18-year-old, adding to what he said. Firstly, I mean, you would have been really optimistic towards, what your goal is.
Yeah.
But then the challenges, the problems, were you scared, and how did you deal with being, I wouldn't say alone, but managing by yourself over there?
And what was the mindset? Like, why did you leave, basically?
Why did I leave? Okay.
Yeah.
Why did I leave? Because I was accepted into the London School of Economics.
Okay.
And and I obtained a very sizable student loan to be able to go.
Right.
Basic fundamentals of why I left.
Right.
Yeah.
A big reason why I applied to the London School of Economics was because I wanted to study international relations as an undergraduate, which is not something that I was finding as an undergraduate degree in India
Right.
at the time.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, look, I'm not being a burden on my parents by going abroad because I've got a student loan, so I'll be paying that off. And I'm getting the course that I would like to study, plus at one of the best institutes in the world. Why not? Right?
Absolutely.
I also feel like there's I don't know whether this is a personality trait in me or if it's just a function of age. Like, you don't think bad things will happen. Yeah. Like, there's a level of daring that comes when you're young. You're just like, okay, let's do it, man. Let's just pack our bags and move to another country, and we're going there for the right reasons.
Right.
We're going there with the right intentions. I went there to get a very good education, which touch wood I managed to get. And you don't sit there and worry about like what's life going to be like. Am I going to struggle? Is it going to get cold and stuff like that? So there's that degree of like almost daring to go.
Yeah.
What was it like? Like, it was very interesting transitioning to London. I think it was a lot easier for me to go to London than it might have been to, say, go to Oxford or Cambridge or any other smaller town in the UK, because London is extremely cosmopolitan. It is extremely fast.
And a little similar to Bombay.
Very similar to Bombay. So one of my fun experiences is like a couple of weeks or maybe a week or so in to university, we were all assigned a tutor. Like, who was your contact in the administration, in your department, and not like a junior person. These were senior professors who had written many, many books and were world-class experts in their space. So I went to meet my tutor, and one of the first questions he asked me is like, how are you finding adjusting to being in a big city like London? I'm like, it's great. I can get on the train, I can get on the bus, nobody's pushing me, it's great. And I don't have to jostle for anything, and it's easy. And he was just sat there like, are you sure? Like, are you sure it's okay? Because all of the other tutees that he had would come in from other cities in London, other cities in the UK or other cities in Europe, and find London really overwhelming. And I used to be like, this is great. I'm so familiar with this.
So did he ask you that question considering you are an Indian, sorry?
Yeah. So he obviously asked it with very good intentions, because he thought that I would be struggling, particularly as I'm not from the UK. But I think being in London was easier. And I think over the years, even when I do travel a lot across the UK with my work, even then I see still a big difference between London as a city and the rest of the country.
So would you say London is far more developed and far more fast in terms of a lifestyle over there as compared to the other cities of UK?
I think, so there are big cities around the world that are a category unto itself. Okay? Like Tokyo, Singapore, New York, SF, London. They are a category unto itself. Like, they are the biggest attractors of talent in their region. And so if you look at London, for example, and it's very similar to Mumbai, because like Mumbai, London has a film industry, an entertainment industry, a news industry, a banking industry, a fashion industry, a massive art scene, So all of these things are in London. And the only thing that London has that Mumbai doesn't have is that, football. Mumbai has cricket. So London also has cricket. So that's cool. But the one thing that London has that Mumbai doesn't is that it's also the center of government. So one London is Bombay and Delhi.
Yeah.
But I find it really interesting because now more and more, as I experience India and I experience Mumbai, I experience Delhi, like the experience of these cities is becoming on par with those, world-class cities.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, it is a bit, the traffic's a bit insane and it is a bit hazy and smoky, but man, give it 5 years, give it 10 years.
Yeah.
There's stuff in Mumbai today that just isn't there anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
Like London is famous for its West End that has all of the theatres and like musicals and stuff like that. Like look at NMACC.
Oh,
it is way beyond anything I've seen in the West End. Obviously, it's one, right? But as our cities grow, they're going to start creating utilities, they're going to start creating experiences that are on par with anywhere else in the world.
I think a perfect example to this would be Surat. The development that is happening in Surat right now in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of just like NMACC, they've opened a lot of, I would say, exhibition centers and all as well.
Yeah.
And Surat is coming on the hub, I would say, of India right now.
And it's one of the many, like you said, because there's so many tier 2 cities that are like becoming on par with tier 1, and then I think they're going to go global at some point.
Much. So you asked me what it was like growing up at that time.
Right. Yeah.
When I was growing up, there were 4 metros. Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, and at that time called Madras, and Kolkata. Then called Calcutta. Then we've had Bangalore. That's come up. That's on par with any of the other metros. We have Hyderabad that's come up. That's
Pune
on
that's
par.
Come up,
Pune that's come up. That's on par. Pune used to be a sleepy outpost of Mumbai, right? Like, and now it is with it.
Oh man,
Pune is very, very active right now.
I love Pune.
Pune
and what's funny is when we used to drive to Pune, we would get off the expressway and it was still some distance until you got to the city. Now when you go to Pune, you get out of the Mumbai Pune expressway and you are in Pune, right? Like that's where it starts. So and this is happening. Surat is another one that's coming up. I think Jaipur is one to watch. I would watch Madhya Pradesh very, very closely. I'm super interested in what happens in Uttar Pradesh. Like Uttar Pradesh on its own could be one of the largest economies in the world. And I think the way
they want to make it a $1 trillion economy.
Exactly.
The state itself.
And that would be amazing. That would be amazing. I mean, if you think about, we're going to get into economics, man. You guys want to hear a little bit?
We're okay with it.
I know it's going to flow.
I love it. I want to eco.
Let's talk about how great India is. So when I look Bharat, let's talk about Bharat as well. Let's definitely cover that. So when we look at the GDP of the top countries in the world, let's take the top 3 economies, right? Like China, best I remember, is about 18 trillion GDP. US is something silly like 27 trillion GDP last count. India is currently at 4 trillion. And we had a statement by Mr. Mukesh Ambani that said that India will be like a 40 trillion economy by 2047, which means that really to achieve that, we would have to grow at a compounded growth rate of about 10 to 12% per year. Which is, we won't start it in 2024, 2025. I think we're now at about 6%, but I do think that there will be years of 12% growth. But you net it out, that's the level of growth that we're going to see. Now, if you look at the fundamentals of any country, if I were to say the UK has to grow at a rate of 12% for the next 24 years, you would say, oh, that's a bit nuts, right? Like, it's already quite developed. It's got a stable population at about 70 million, which is the size of Gujarat. It's got like well-tapped oil resources, hydrocarbon resources. It's, so it's whatever it's been able to do, it has done. And yes, there are some areas for improvement. There's sure some areas for headroom. There's new industries that could come up tomorrow that we don't know about, that UK might be the hub of. But based on fundamental, like very basic economic fundamentals, it's unlikely to happen. You look at India then. What, 1.4 billion people. Okay, about more than half of which are below the age of 35. Which is both a productive and a consumption asset. Okay, we are fiscally conservative. What that means is that we borrow less than what we earn,
Right.
which is a very smart thing to do.
Right.
Yeah.
But you look at a lot of Western economies, they are borrowing like 100%, 120, 130% of their GDP.
Yeah.
Comparatively, India is 80% of the GDP, right? We're borrowing only 80% of the GDP. And then you look even at the big cities.
Right.
Mumbai has phenomenal potential to grow.
Yeah.
You know, Mumbai, Navi Mumbai, that whole sort of
Yeah.
area you conglomerated,
Yeah.
it's got growth there.
Right.
The Delhi NCR is becoming huge. You've got a new JR airport coming in Noida. That's going to be a game changer.
Right.
You've got similar potential in Chennai, in similar things happening in Hyderabad, in Bangalore, and you've got completely new cities coming.
Right.
Yeah.
And beyond that, you've got these large populous states of young people
Right.
who are really driven to have a better lifestyle than their parents.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
in Madhya Pradesh, in Jharkhand, in Bihar, in Rajasthan, in UP, the potential is endless. Yeah. What do we need to do now is that India has grown with a system called Jugaad,
Yeah.
Right.
which is a form of innovation to be able to work around rules that are restrictive.
Right.
And I think what's been interesting to observe over the last 10 years or so is that the rule-making manual has changed. Rather than restricting innovation and activity, they are trying to enable it.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not perfect by
Right.
any measure. There's silly rules everywhere all the time, right? But wow, if you can use the energy that goes into Jugaad to work around the rules,
Right,
to
right.
work with and
the rules,
accelerate
yeah.
the impact of rule
Right,
making,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
there's like huge potential.
Yeah.
I think us as Indians, we would rather than following the rules, we would want to find the loopholes around the rules. It's like that.
Yeah, and
But,
I get asked all the time. It's like, अच्छा तेरे को इंडिया के बारे में इतना अच्छा लगता है तो तू लंदन क्यों रहता है? which I think is a legit question. But I feel like, you know, I'm still only like 15 years into my career.
Yeah.
There's at least another 30 to 40 years of productive
Right.
working life left, and already a lot of the work that I do outside of my
Right.
day job
Right.
is serving India and Indians, you know, with my YouTube channel and
Yes.
so on. So.
And one thing, I mean, to anyone who says that, in defense of you, I think he is more in touch with our culture and our values and everything than most of us even living here, even though you're in London.
But I feel like I've been particularly privileged to achieve that. See, I think when I was in India, there was no need to understand our culture because you got it every day in such simple ways.
Yeah.
You step into a taxi, you will see a little altar there. You go from point A to point B, you will see a little temple. And our temples also designed such that from the road you can see the deity.
Yeah.
You know, there are no doors.
You'll
or
always
anything.
pass the temple and you'll
And
do
you'll do
like
this.
you'll bow down
Exactly.
and you'll do
Right,
this.
So we feel very connected with it and we are very nourished by it. So when we're constantly getting nourished, there's no search, you know, whereas I think when you go abroad, that nourishment goes away and like a real hunger develops, you know, and when I was in London, for example, I was 18, 19 years old and I was like, I call myself Hindu, but I don't even know what is written in the Bhagavad Gita. And that actually, it became a trigger to change my life. But also, I feel now that I've lived abroad for so many years and I've got to a certain level in my career, it's important to give people access to information that I didn't have when I was 18. Like there was no YouTube when I was 18.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
one thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But also you didn't have access to this information, you know. So like now that the mechanisms exist, let's do it now.
Yeah.
I'm never going to judge someone and say you don't know and I know. But like, okay, you don't know, cool. Let me tell you what I know.
Yeah.
You tell me what you know and let's like give each other a lift.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Wow, I love that. Give each other a lift.
So I think Sir is basically trying to bridge the gap.
Who's sir? Sir कौन है भाई? यहाँ पे कोई sir नहीं है यार.
Om is basically trying to bridge the gap
Yeah.
with people who know and with people who don't know as well.
Yeah. I'm so happy to be on this pod. I'm telling you, like such an epic podcast.
Oh man.
Thank you.
We're so happy to have him also because
We are
this is-
extremely overjoyed.
This is, I saw, okay, this is for the public before we continue with the next thing. I saw Om Dada's podcast on the Ranveer Show 2022 and I loved it so much. I messaged him on LinkedIn and then we stayed in touch and then he found out about BTG on LinkedIn and then we're here.
And then I saw your New Year's episode
Yeah,
and I
and
was
you
like, this is
saw
such
it.
an epic episode. I love the vibe of this conversation. And I listened to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And I reached out and I was like, I want to be on this podcast. Please, mujhe bula lo.
So truth be said about this, we planned this episode 10 minutes prior, 10-15 minutes prior. We're like, let's just talk about it, man. Because we wanted to be, so after we shot this,
your New Year's episode.
Our
New Year's episode,
The New Year's episode, we planned it 10-15 minutes prior to us
Really?
shooting. Yeah, because we were like cricket. Then I wrote it in my iPad.
Yeah.
So cricket, we had planned it out. New Year's,
Okay,
we were
okay,
like,
yeah.
we'll speak about these things, but technically we ended up speaking about much more.
Yeah, we didn't decide that it would be the kind of chat it ended up
Right,
becoming,
yeah,
which was what you
right.
told us that you
Yeah,
liked.
right.
It was basically a heart-to-heart.
It was a heart-to-heart conversation that two
Yeah.
brothers are having.
But I felt like we missed out on one very important question that wasn't covered in that podcast, which is, why did Pritish shave his mustache?
Why didn't?
Why did you? It was there. It was in our lives for 1 month and then boom, gone.
The funny part, I shaved it right after shooting. So we shot those 2 episodes on the same day in the same
Back
venue.
to back.
I went to the washroom, shaved it, and I came back down.
Why?
I'm like, for one episode,
You look.
So I mean, apparently I've been told I look better without.
Yeah, frankly, even I
facial
feel he
hair.
looks better without facial.
So, and I was just trying out a new look. I didn't get the approval that I wanted, so I'm like,
Oh, nice. I like it.
So yeah, I mean, that's the reason I shaved. To everyone who's been asking, it's not only home. Everyone's been asking.
Now
me
we
that.
know.
But sir, coming back, like when we actually, you only segued into that spirituality, you being in London, how you came into being spiritual.
Yeah.
But so, do you think the fact if you wouldn't have left India, if you would have been in India, you wouldn't have been as spiritual as you are right now?
It's very hard to say what would have happened because it's such a long time ago now.
Right.
It's like half my life. Like if half my life took a different turn, I could be in a completely different place right now. Right? Like,
Fair enough. Yeah.
I always think of it as like ships sailing together in parallel. Like one ship makes a 1 degree turn, and then
It'll
like
take you
3
miles
days
away,
later,
yeah.
it's in a completely different part of the world. And I think that's a little bit like that. Like what would have happened if I hadn't gone to the UK? I still think that I would have had a lot of fun in life. I still think that it would have been quite a, it would have been a very, very fulfilling experience as I've had. And I definitely feel like spirituality would have been a part of it, one way or the other.
But to the extent that you have it right now?
I don't know. I feel, see, a lot of the spiritual knowledge that I have has come from India. Okay. So when I was in the UK, I studied with the Chinmaya Mission.
Oh, same, sir. I've done the Bal Vihar.
Nice.
And I was a part of Chick for some time.
Yeah. So we used to have someone who came to university and taught the Bhagavad Gita. A friend of mine used to organize those talks, and every week she used to invite me, and every week I used to promise her that I'm going to go, and every week I used to just not go, because it was just not, it was not there on my horizon at the time. And then one week I did go, and I found it interesting, and then missed a couple of weeks, and then another week I did go, and then I started to go a little bit more regularly.
Right.
And I found the discussions to be quite interesting.
Right.
And then 1 year, because I'm particularly frugal and never really came back to India over Christmas because I thought it was an indulgence that my student loan couldn't afford me. I stayed in London. I mean, this happened every year. But that year was particularly helpful because I was really bored and a little bit sad because London really empties out around Christmas. It really empties out. Like in India, Diwali,
everybody comes.
Huge.
And
it's like if you know someone who is not with anyone for Diwali, 10 people will invite that person to their
exactly,
house.
Yeah.
London is the opposite. UK is the opposite. The Western world is very different. People go to their homes and they're like, no, this is my family time. And, others are invited. So I was just in London. I was a little bit bored. There weren't those many people there. And I had my copy of the Bhagavad Gita and I picked it up. And I started reading it. Like previously when we used to go for the classes, we used to discuss stuff. But they were discussing like chapter 3. So it was still like quite conceptual to me.
Right.
But chapter 1 from the beginning is like talking about all of the mental turmoil that Arjun goes through. And I was like, this is me, and he's making 10,000 excuses why he's not going to fight. And I was like, bro, I make all these excuses why I don't have to study or do my homework or, just do stuff. Like, ultimately he was trying to procrastinate in a situation that was, hugely uncomfortable for him.
Yeah.
And that's, to a very different extent. But fundamentally, that's what procrastination is for us, right? Like, and as students, what's bigger than procrastination? Like, you're just scared of doing stuff, so you just don't want to do it and you put it off. Yeah. And then when you can't do it anymore, you just, get into like flow mode or whatever and just execute it overnight. That was my life. And I suddenly realized that this is super relevant to, what I'm doing. So anyway, long story short, that's how I first got into it.
And tell us the long story.
Long story. So long story. Then what happened is this happened over New Year's. So then I got super regular in attending the classes, and I was doing my own study. So in the classes, you are studying chapter 3 of the Gita. Yeah, and I was doing my own self-study before. And so just so people don't know, Bhagavad Gita has 18 chapters and 700 verses. Right. And each chapter has a specific theme. So chapter 3 is called Karma Yoga, which is about like how do you work in the world, what is your mental attitude supposed to be. And chapter 1 is called Arjuna Vishad Yoga, which is Arjuna's inner turmoil. And so I was connecting with one chapter and then finding wisdom in discussion with another chapter. So that was a very interesting experience. And in about April, they were going on a retreat for the youth to France.
Oh, wow.
And so, which sounds, it was very nice. It was very nice. But it was like London and France are a little bit like Mumbai and Goa.
Okay.
So they just took a bus and went. Right. And there's the channel, English channel in the middle, and there's a tunnel that goes under the English channel.
Oh. Okay.
So I expected to be able to see fish. Clearly, that's not how it works. There's a tunnel with a train and there's concrete walls, so you don't see anything.
You can't see anything, yeah.
Anyway, my misplaced expectations aside, I had done.
Europe ka machli.
I had done a job for about 3 or 6 months with Shadi.com.
Oh wow! Yeah. Okay.
First job.
We didn't find that on your LinkedIn.
It's been scrubbed a little bit clean off. There's nothing wrong. It was fun to work with Shadi.com, but it was just not relevant to my current work as a MD in banking strategy.
Does anyone in your office know that? Any Indian rather?
Yeah, even if that's what I was going to say. Even if they did, they wouldn't really know what it was. But yeah, so that was an epic cultural experience. So I had a little bit of money from that. So I put all of that money to pay for the trip, and I paid the rest of it to get a visa to go to France and stuff like that. So that was cool. But like when I was there on this retreat, it was actually life-changing. Because before I went on the retreat, my lifestyle would be such that I would go to sleep around like 1, 2 o'clock, wake up around 10, 11, then eat something. Then by the time I got to college, and this isn't the period when we were in lectures, so this was just before the exams. So it was like free study. So by the time I got to uni, it was like 2 o'clock, and then I would just stay there and I would study, but take breaks, and then it'll go on till whatever o'clock, and then 12 o'clock come back home, pick up some food on the way, like pick up like something from a supermarket for £1, eat it once you get home, and then just like lie in bed and whatever, waste some time. And then at this retreat, like we used to wake up, I think 6 to 6:30 we had meditation. Okay, or 6:30 to 6 to 7 we had morning meditation. 7 o'clock we had our first class of the day. So we had a visiting Swami who was lecturing us, and it was beautiful. Like it was really, really nice. So we had 7 to about 8:30 we would have our first lecture of the day. 8:30 then we would have half an hour to get dressed. Breakfast at 9 to 10 was breakfast. 10 o'clock was our second class of the day till about 11:30. 11:30 we'd have a 15-minute break and then go into 45 minutes of group discussion.
Wow.
You know, so imagine by 12:30, I haven't even become conscious in my day life.
Yeah.
Right?
And then you've achieved so much during the day.
By 12:30, I was achieving it, and like, I was like, this is me.
Right.
You know, like I never expected that of me, but it was done, and it was done like, and I was feeling good. I was energized.
Right.
And so, and there were other things that happened in on that retreat. Like I became really connected with the message of spirituality, and I think that created a lot of dynamism in my life.
Right.
But I think that the only sort of tangible thing was this experience.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I needed to replicate this once I get back to London.
Right.
And I wasn't heading towards a great score at university, and I was actually quite embarrassed about it and a little bit stressed about it as well, because I used to do lots of extracurricular stuff and whatnot, and like my academics were suffering as a result, and I was like, right, okay, you have to get like this particular grade. And how we're going to do it is that max out on 3 of the 4 subjects I had and just pass the 4th subject.
right.
You know, so
strategizing.
Yeah. Since then, so I literally I took my exam schedule and said, okay, which are the papers, when are they coming, and then just worked back from there and said, okay, how many topics do I need to study per paper? Gave each topic 3 days, and I would literally. The first day would be me reading and making first one and a half day was me reading and making rough notes. The next one and a half day was taking that and making not even fair notes, but just 1 page thought, what do you call it? Yeah.
A summary of...
Exactly. So you could just read it before the exam and you knew it, and then you went in.
Yeah.
And I did that, must have done that for at least 40 to 60 different topics. In a period of 6 weeks. And so for me, my first real, adult experience with spirituality was something that had such a major impact in my life.
Yeah.
And it really gave me strength, dynamism, focus to get stuff done. I wasn't sat there thinking I want to do so many hours of meditation a day. I wasn't thinking that I want to achieve self-realization. But I was sat there thinking meditating for a little bit and having this type of discipline helps me achieve so much. So I want to keep pursuing it. And then what happened is, after the exams, whilst the run up to the exams, I was still going to those classes, and I started to LSE classes stopped because exam period. Yeah. So we went. There was another sort of youth group, Chinmaya Yuva Kendra, as you said, CHIK, that used to meet on the same time on a Wednesday evening. So I started to go for those. And then through that, because I had gone to the retreat as well, I started to go for more classes. And I was very lucky that the resident Acharya at that time was phenomenal. I mean, this is not to compare it with any other Acharya, I'm sure. But I was very lucky that I had someone who was so clear in their concepts and so good at communicating them. And they had such depth of not just spiritual experience, but spiritual aspiration that ultimately it rubs off on you.
Yeah.
And so everything that I had to learn from the Shastras as such, I studied it in a period of 1.5, max 2 years. Right? Between say mid 2007 to mid 2009.
Yeah.
And then it was 15 years of living this Shastra. That then resulted in a YouTube channel in 2022. Or 23 we launched it. So it was a really beautiful experience, because it not only did you learn, but you saw very practical, real examples of what impact it can have on your life.
I want to ask you, because it started off at such a young age, and I mean, look, I'm still 22, but when I was 18, and when a lot of people I know, and people, because I'm surrounded obviously by still younger people, I know that a lot of people don't either get the opportunity to incline towards this, or they don't themselves have that seed in them. And I don't know what the reason is. Either it's not been there at home, or they've been disconnected with it because at school we're not taught it, especially in the convent schools. Like, no hate, because I loved my school, but there was a lot of our own cultural stuff that we weren't taught about, or we didn't know only. So the interest development doesn't really happen. So it's amazing that happened for you, because I know it turned your life not around, but I know the impact it had. But like, how do we tell other people of our age to kind of take to it? What's their interest point? How do they start?
Well, I mean, I can only really speak about Hindu spirituality because that's what I've studied and that's what I've lived. And I think it's an important point to make, because every religion is spiritual in its own way. And every religion has important spiritual processes. But I can't speak for all of them.
But truthfully speaking, I feel people my age somehow are drifting away from spirituality. I mean, look, everyone is to some extent spiritual, but if you know the Charvak philosophy, everyone's kind of in that Charvak zone rather than, I would say, a deep spiritual zone.
See, I think we have to ask ourselves some fundamental questions. Whose journey is linear? Whose journey, like, मैं ये time पे सीखा and I followed it and I came here. It's nobody's journey is linear. Everyone's journey has its ups and downs. I had periods of my life where I really walked away from sadhana. Like, I walked away from any practice because I felt like it wasn't serving me. There were periods of time where I didn't have any sangha, like I didn't have any spiritual company at all, because the job that I did, I mean, there were periods of my life where I was taking like 4 flights a week. You know, what sangha are you going to have?
You can't.
You don't have any bandwidth for anything. So I feel like we can't say that spirituality enters our life at a certain stage and we hold on to it and we get to where we want to get to. I think the reality is many people have triggers that turn them towards spirituality.
And
I think one of the challenges, this is a big reason why I made my own YouTube channel, to discuss it. Because there are some people who don't have faith, and no judgment. If you don't have faith, fine, pursue what you have to pursue, right? There are some people who are all in, okay, which is great. Like, and there are a number of organizations to serve them who will welcome them and say, okay, you know, here's everything that you ever wanted and we're going to give it to you. But for someone who has had that trigger that turns them towards spirituality, and that person has a quizzical mindset, who wants to critically engage with all the subjects, who doesn't want to just hear this is Swarg, this is Narak, if you do good, this will happen, if you do bad, this will happen, but who wants to really understand, say, well, okay, how does that work? You know, and what is the practical application of it in my life? I feel like that big middle is underserved. And I feel like that big middle is what turns towards it, doesn't like what they see, and therefore move back to whatever is serving them. You know, because, like, say, if someone enjoys a drink, or if someone enjoys a cigarette, they're not doing it because they hate it. They're doing it because the experience of smoking or the experience of drinking is giving them something. It is giving them some utility. Right? And I feel like for a lot of people who have a questioning mindset, they come to spirituality, but they don't have anyone to
guide them.
Or to even articulate it in a way that they feel like they can extract utility. I'm not saying कि ये है तुम ले लो अभी तुम्हारा life बदल गया. But it's like ये है. Engage with it. Try it, see it, and it's only when they actually try it that it'll go deep in their lives. So that is the mindset with which I made my YouTube channel, so that it's an open space for people to engage critically with spirituality, and then take from it what they want without feeling pressurized to like follow this, you have to do this, you're going to hell if you don't do it. You know, and I feel like, see, the work that I do on YouTube is to like maybe plant a seed, maybe water it a little bit. And at some point, that seed will germinate in its own time. It will germinate in its own way. It will be nurtured by its own circumstances. That's not my job. I'm not here to convert anyone to Hinduism or to spirituality and say that this is the way to do it. I'm just here to say that, look, this is a process, a philosophy, and a community that has been around for thousands of years. All of the contemporaries of Hinduism a few thousand years ago have now died out. You know, But this has remained. So there must be some value to it. Here's my articulation of what the value is. Please engage with it. Yeah? And if you engage with it and say it's not for you, fine, chalo, good for you.
At least you tried.
But if you engage with it, suddenly you're like, and I actually get messages like this. I get comments on my videos saying that this is what I've been searching for a long time.
Wow.
You know, like this, I've chanted Hanuman Chalisa for my whole life. And now I know what it means. You know, and like I've loved it my whole life, but like now I love it even more.
Yeah.
You know, it's another thing that at this exact moment in time, all of my YouTube videos are off the air. But that's an interesting experience in itself, you know, and gives us an opportunity to restart and reserve with all of the learnings that we've had in the last 12 months.
You know, I want to actually, since we're on that, because you switched gears basically. I mean, you've worked in the UK for so many years. You've been in the banking industry. You've had this spiritual background, and then there's content. I think I know a little bit of how that started. But how did it start?
So I think it's worth saying that I haven't switched entirely. I still have my day job. I still work in banking.
But I moonlights as a spiritual guy.
I see this as my service.
Right.
And I feel like it's a little bit like serving the earth again. Like the earth gives us everything, all of our food, everything comes from it. And I think at the end of it, you don't want to just take. You want to give back to the earth. You want to take care of it. And I feel like that's what Hinduism and spirituality has been to me. So I still have my day job. I still work in banking. And I think what happened is, you know, after university, I started my career. I was young. I was, you know, achieving things. It was great. I was living a lifestyle that was extremely busy, and I did not have time to, particularly for sadhana and sangha. So in my view, really your spiritual engagement consists of three things. And it's very straightforward. Shastra, sadhana, sangha. Shastra means wisdom. Sadhana means some practice, any practice. And sangha means community, right? So of those three things, my shastra was still with me because I had studied it and I would still read it. You know, I'd take my Gita on a flight and read at least a little bit when I was traveling. But there was no sadhana and no sangha. And I realized, and sadhana re-entered my life around 2018. You know, I started my career in 2009. So like nearly 10 years later, it re-entered my life. It was there, but it wasn't regular. And then you know, a point came in 2018. I was like, I just want to do this every day. I made a decision. And the funny thing is, like, my career skyrocketed after that. It was so interesting to observe, like the challenges that I would have in meetings, the people who would be opposed to my perspective, they were like, yeah, oh, great, you know, like the doors just started opening. It was nuts. And then Sangha, which is the third part, like crept into my life a little bit just before the COVID pandemic and came in a big way after that, like in 2021. And Sangha, I think, touches on the question that you're asking, because a friend of mine who is a serial entrepreneur, extremely successful, and I have for years caught up every 6 months. Every 6 months, not even once a year. Every 6 months, we will have a state of the world conversation. Like, what's happening in the world, what's happening in my world, what's happening in your world. And it wasn't like, who are you dating or anything. It's like, what do we think are the macroeconomic implications of quantitative easing? Wow. You know, like that type of conversation.
I think who are you dating is our generation's conversation.
That's what the 2023 recap was.
No. Hang on. I used to have a lot of those conversations with a lot of other people. But, you know.
But this is in particular
I think
this was my equation with him.
Exactly. I think I'm a little old-fashioned that way, because I would like to have these conversations. What's the macroeconomic situation around the world? Like dating and all. I mean, come on, bro. Like, grow up.
Tell us, how many hearts has Pritish broken in 2024?
None.
We'll get to it. So anyway, so my friend and I, we used to have these conversations, and as the pandemic progressed, they would have more and more of a spiritual bent to them. Because I was also able to get deeper in my Shastric study as well as deeper in my sadhana.
Right.
You know, to the point where there were days in the pandemic where I was doing 2 hours of meditation. Because what is there? You wake up, you work from home, you would do thoda cooking, and then you're doing
Done.
nothing. And I still live on my own.
Yeah.
So you meditate for the rest of the time. And just in one conversation, I said to him, I was like, look, I'm studying this one text called Viveka Chudamani, which was written by Adi Shankaracharya. It's called a Prakaran Grantha. And I just said to him that, look, a friend and I, we just get on a call once a week and we go through it, like verse by verse. We are progressing through it. And he's like, that's a great idea. We should do it. I was like, but you'll need a bit of a foundation in Vedanta. So let's do Bhagavad Gita, which is just easier, and it's, people will connect with it more. People would connect with it more. And he's like, yes, we have to do this. And he assembled a group of people like him who were all CEOs, COOs, startup founders, like doing very, very well in their professional life. And we would get together once a week and discuss the Bhagavad Gita in a very structured way, going chapter by chapter, verse by verse. That started in the middle of 2021. It's still continuing now.
Wow.
Several years later. And it was those sessions were facilitated by me and a ordained monk from ISKCON, and both of us got different perspectives. So I would get the Advaita perspective, he would get the Dvaita perspective. He also was a very senior, he had reached like pretty senior levels in banking in the UK. So he had also achieved things professionally and then chosen to go down this path, which I think made the dynamic of the whole discussion very interesting and very practical. People were like, okay, I get the philosophy, like how do I apply this in my life? And they would push you, like a CEO pushes you, like a founder has no time for BS. They're like, okay, I want to know.
Practical application.
Exactly, I want to cut to the heart of it. And so they were really beautiful sessions, and they still are. And that group was the one that encouraged me to start sharing. And I was super reluctant until this friend of mine basically was visiting London and said, I'm in your house, ek to record karke reel dal de. And then I put my first reel on in, I think, 2022 it must have been.
Was this after the podcast? Because
this was before.
Oh, it was before. Okay.
So in like Guru Purnima 2022 was the first Instagram reel that I put. If someone wants to go that far back on my Insta timeline, I'm sure they'll be able to find it. And the podcast that you talk about is the podcast with Ranveer. So Ranveer and I went to school together. I was several years his senior, but we've kept in touch over the years. I saw him launch Beerbiceps both on Instagram and on YouTube, and I was lucky enough to be one of his early followers, and I've just loved his journey. And I'm really amazed and proud at what he's been able to achieve, not just for himself, but like the impact that he's had across the country, and I would say across the world even. He and I had reconnected in COVID. We had a nice long Zoom chat because he didn't have that much to do. I didn't have that much to do. So, what would otherwise might have been a 15-20 minute conversation was a couple of hours. It was a lot of fun. And then I came back to Mumbai around April 2022, which was my first trip back in 2.5 years. I used to come every year for Ganpati. So 2 years for Ganpati I couldn't come. And I did the puja over Zoom. So I was chanting in London and my sister was doing the puja in Mumbai. That's how the puja happened, So it was really, really emotional and very nice being back. And then Ranveer and I hung out again. And it wasn't with any intention of recording, we were just hanging out as friends. And he said that you should come, and I was very reluctant. Until between Ranveer and this other friend of mine, they basically they were like, hey, this is the date, come. Come. And I was like, chal, okay, maybe the universe is nudging me in this direction. Let's see what's gonna happen. And we recorded that podcast, and I said to Ranveer that if you don't want to put this live, it's okay. Like I'm fine with it. Like agar nahi live lagaya to. He's like, bro, what are you saying? And I was like, look, okay, I have been consuming YouTube content on spirituality for 15, 16 years at that point, right? And I said to him, I haven't heard any mainstream platform discussing Upanishads. Okay, there'll be a directional conversation around Bhagavad Gita and so on. But we went into the Upanishads, which is the highest level of philosophical texts that are directly part of the Vedas. And we quoted specific Upanishads in that podcast and spoke about it. And I said to him that, look, this is just not there. I don't think it's unlikely that it will connect. So if you decide as the creator that nahi chalega, it's cool, don't put it. And he's like, bro, at least 2.5 lakh views will come. And I said, chalo 20,000 come, I'll be happy that 20,000 people have seen this content. That podcast today has upwards of
7 lakh something.
Upwards of 1.3 million views.
Yeah, this the first
podcast.
one. Yeah, that's the one I watched, and that's what I wrote about on LinkedIn.
And I think watching the response to that and reading the comments and stuff like that was what convinced me that there is an audience for the type of message that I want to share. Because the type of message that I share is not hyphenated in any way. It's not like, okay, you have to agree to everything that I'm saying. It's not from this school and this school only, or this perspective and this perspective only. It's very open and it's very accepting. But it is very much grounded in Shastra. Like if someone can, watches a clip of the channel once it comes back online, which we can talk about if you want. People can look at a specific clip and say, okay, you said this. Where does this perspective come from? And we are able to link it back to Upanishads or to a Purana, or say actually this Puran says this about this thing, but another Puran says this about that thing. So and the Vedas say that this is why there are differing perspectives. So you choose which perspective you want to take, which one you connect with, and that would still be valid as long as you keep working. And that's the beauty of Hinduism. Like there isn't, Hinduism doesn't have these 10 commandments or rules and dogma that are associated with other faiths. I'm not criticizing other faiths.
You wouldn't say it's not textbook.
It is principles driven.
Right.
Not rules driven.
Right.
Yeah, and this is a beautiful thing. The principle is, this is how things work. This is how karma works. Now choose,
It's up to you.
You can live like Ram, you can live like Ravan. You choose. You saw what happened to Ravan.
This is the best way to put it.
They also say too much rules is also not good, too little rules is also not good.
Yeah, so I think guidelines is very important. Principles are very important.
Yes.
And we need examples of people who have lived who have navigated those principles well. That's why we have our Puranas. Like we have a lot of people, and we're going into a little bit of depth here in Hinduism, so I'll just define the terms. In Hinduism, you have obviously the Vedas, and Hinduism is a term that Hindus themselves might not recognize from a different generation. Sanatan Vedic Dharma. So the core of Hinduism is the Vedas. There are 4 Vedas. Okay, the Vedas have the philosophical sections of them are called the Upanishads, which talk about who am I, who is the divine, and what is my relationship to the divine. Then you have the Puranas that say the same thing, okay, but illustrate that with examples. And you have a third category of text called the Itihasas, which are Ramayana and Mahabharata, which take the same principle and make it a little bit more contemporaneous. So you say, for example, the Puranic stories might be predominantly from Satyuga, which is tens of thousands of years ago, or believed to be tens of thousands of years ago, whereas the Ramayana was in Treta Yuga and Mahabharata was in Dwapar Yuga, which is closer to our age. So we can identify with it a little bit more. And there's such beautiful stories. Like one example is when Ram was building the bridge over the ocean to get to Sri Lanka. At that time, there's a beautiful dialogue between Ravan and his wife Mandodari. That is known as Ravan Mandodari Samvad. And Mandodari is believed to be a very pious person. And she says to him, she's like, look, Ram is coming. And because he has dharma on his side, however strong you think you are not going to win. So you still have time. Go to Ram, surrender to him, and he will forgive you. And Ram had said that even if Ravan comes and surrenders to me, and he properly surrenders with his heart, I will accept. I won't punish him. And Ravan says, you know what? I know what is the truth. I know what is the right thing. I know that I am wrong. But I still feel compelled to act in this way. I can't control myself. And like how many times we know what the right thing is, but we can't control ourselves. We can't. We know that it's it's wrong, or it's not serving us to consume something, whatever that thing might be.
Yeah.
Right? We know that it's not serving us, but we will still do it because we can't stop ourselves. This is illustrated thousands of years ago in stories. And so the point of Puranas and Itihasas is to bring them to life and say, these are the principles that the Vedas and Upanishads speak about. This is, how you can navigate them, and here's what happens if you don't. So our duty as Hindus is not to hate Ravan.
Yes.
Not to demonize him, to use some of the language today, but to recognize that when you step away from dharma, or when you allow your more baser instincts to rule your life, forget dharma, I mean, those are loaded words. But when we allow our baser instincts to drive our life, like we plant the seeds that ultimately cause our own ruin.
It's like we are the master of our own journey. At the end of it, we need to decide what we are doing.
We should be aware.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah, pretty much. I think, see, one of the beautiful things about spirituality, and Hindu spirituality as a result of that, is that it's not only a system of faith.
Right.
It is a system of experience.
Yes.
It doesn't say believe this and this will happen. It says try this and see what happens.
Love it.
I mean, the way you just put it, it's goosebumps all over.
So that's the intention behind our YouTube channel. That's why we're sharing all of these insights. And we go through a very structured way, over the last 12 months, we've gone through the Bhagavad Gita in a very structured way. Again, chapter by chapter. Most verses, not all of them, but most of the verses we are going through. We had got through till chapter 4, when we had technical issues that caused us to pause the channel. We took the Hanuman Chalisa, which is 40 verses, 40 chopais and 3 dohas, and organized it into 24 videos. I think about 20 of those videos had gone live already when we had to again pause all activity on the channel. So there is a body of content there. We're working very, very, very hard to edit it and to bring it to people again. And actually, it's every cloud has a silver lining. It's been super tough to watch something that you have poured a year of your life into.
Yes.
And like to give you an example, I would wake up in London. When I was in London, I would wake up at 5 a.m. Or 5:30, let's say. So 5:30 to 6:30, I would whatever, get ready, do a little bit of meditation, have some breakfast. 6:30 to 7:30, I would sit and script, write the scripts for these episodes.
Right.
Okay. Then 7:30, if I was working at home, I would go sit at my desk and and if I wasn't working at home, obviously I'd commute to work. Come back around 7:30 in the evening, 6:37 in the evening. And if I was filming that evening, then we would film for 5 hours and record 8 episodes in one go. And if we weren't filming, then my mom was staying with me for 3 months last year, which was great. In the evening, we would sit and discuss. Is this the right way to share it? And so that is the level of effort that went into this channel. Even when we did edits, like towards the end, we found that if we made a 10% improvement in the video, the improvement in performance of that video was not 10%. The improvement in performance of that video was like 3x, 4x. So 10% improvement was giving us 300, 400% improvements. And in the end, we were putting so much thought, care and effort that I would say to my editor, it's like, okay, no, we need to move this piece of music by 1.5 seconds because the beat drop does not align with the way I'm making the point. So why do we care so much about it? Because it is service. And it's not just service to people, but it is service to the divine through the people. And if you really care about someone, if you really love someone, you would make sure that the experience that they have, if you're taking a loved person on holiday, for example, or cooking a meal for them, you would make sure that every element of that was as
Perfect.
thought about, as close to perfection as possible.
Yeah.
You wouldn't give them a mediocre experience.
Right.
So if we are serving the divine and we're serving people, the divine through people, then we want to make sure that that service is as refined as it can be, you know, like, and this is like, someone said to me, that's all well and good, but you have lots of money. It's like, I wasn't sat there with lots of money thinking, how do I spend this? So I made a YouTube channel. Like, this has been a completely bootstrapped effort, you know, and not with the intention of making money. With like editor, I have one editor and a couple of other people who support the channel. They are all doing it out of love for the work. They're not sat there thinking like, what is my take-home pay at the end of the month? And I think that like flavor has really come through.
Yeah.
And you know that it's like you cook something with like love, the person can actually taste it. It tastes better. And I think that's really come through in the work that we have done. And people had really started connecting with it until 48 hours ago when we suddenly had to take it off. And just because I've mentioned it a few times, I'll tell you what happened.
I think this is a great point to say that this is our part one of the conversation.
Oh wait, this was part one? I thought we already started with part two.
No, I think this is part one, and we have a part two that's going to come out very soon. We're going to continue the conversation with, it feels like I'm a radio host, with Mr. Om Dhumatkar on the Bridging the Gap show. But no, we actually have a very interesting part two, which is going to come out very soon. So this is part one, and we'll see you in part two. That's all from us in part one. Let us say bye and see you in the next one.